Hey everyone, welcome back to ChroniTalk, and I'm your host, Mykayla Lynn. Today's episode is a powerful one. It's a good one. We're going to be diving into a story that touches a little bit on some different kind of layers of some different diagnoses, but also how to take care of that on the holistical side and what other avenues that you can take for yourself. So I'm so honored today to be joined by Karissa. This is someone who has a lot of honesty and resilience in their story and is very connected with the community online as well. Karissa lives with a CSF leak, and she also lives with hypermobile EDS. So I'm going to get Karissa to go a little bit more into those and to just open the platform for you to share your story.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me. And thanks for letting me share my story. So my story's it's probably like a lot of people's. I was just living my life and going along. And then about 2 years ago, a little bit over 2 years now, I had a lot of pain in my neck, etc. Had a cervical MRI done, and essentially they found like some stuff going on in my spinal cord in the cervical area. So they ordered a lumbar puncture to see it, just to check to see if I had high CSF pressure actually. And they did that procedure, and I felt this funky relief in the back of my head, like this pressure while they were doing the procedure. And I was like, oh, that seems like a good sign, you know? Then about a day and a half after that, I started getting orthostatic headaches. It was probably about like after I was up about 3 or 4 hours, I would just get this different kind of pain than I'd ever had. It feels like someone's pushing on your face. And I've had that since. So it's been since March of 2023 that happened to me. So from there, it's kind of been a backwards discovery journey of some hindsight issues that I've probably had all along, some things I was born with and never knew, and figuring it all out along the way.
Yeah, I mean, that is a battle.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's something like this that's rare. And like I knew that our healthcare system was tough, and from like a high level data perspective, because I used to be a software developer and work with like healthcare software. So, I understood the industry, but I never knew how many people were out there and how much they can't help, like there's just not answers for so many things out there. So that was that's probably the biggest thing that I've discovered along this journey, is just when you have something rare that you have to be prepared to not get an answer most of the time. And that is something that I didn't get at first, and it just took a long time to get there. But yeah,
Yeah, so
it's a
that
tough
being
thing for
said,
sure.
I mean, that's how you found some other diagnosis as well. So do you want to explain kind of your journey after finding this CSF leak, which, I mean, so the reason for the CSF leak was, well, the reason for the puncture, I'm sorry, was to check the CSF levels.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so what did you find after?
Right. Yeah. So it was to check the CSF levels. Uh-huh. And so when they checked it, and then actually I didn't realize this either at the time, but that's something that's apparently really objective for what's considered high pressure, low pressure. But so what they found is that they considered it a normal level, and then the only solution right now, like the off the bat solution for a CSF leak right now, is first they'll just try to have you rest and hydrate and see if your body heals itself. And if you're still having symptoms, the only treatment really that there is it's called an epidural blood patch. And so what they do is they take your blood, and then they put it into the epidural region of your spine, either they call it a blind one, where they're just kind of putting it in an area, but they don't have a target that they're going for. They just, think this may be where the leak is, or they'll have a targeted one where they're trying to get to cover a certain area and hope that your dura basically absorbs the blood and seals itself from the blood that's going in there. So I had two of those done with no relief. Well, actually, sorry, I had 5 days of relief from the first one. And then after 5 days, like I literally felt there was just this moment where the head pain just came again. And so ever since then, the pain has not gone away. So that was the big thing. And then from there, actually, I didn't know I had a CSF leak then, right? So I knew I was having these headaches, and I knew that it said if you got headaches after the procedure to call the doctor, etc. And the neurosurgeon that I was seeing then, they didn't tell me I had a leak. They were like, well, we'll do a brain MRI after the two patches didn't provide any leak, a brain MRI, and then like a full spine MRI to look to see if they could see a leak on an MRI, and they did not. And so they said, you don't have a leak. They didn't say that we don't know if you don't have a leak or if you do. They just told me, you don't have a leak, and I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. We don't see anything. And that was it. Like, he just kind of left me hanging, actually. And so I had no idea what was going on. And the way that I kind of found the neurologist that I see now that's been helping me through this whole journey is just Googling a few symptoms that I had. Like, I actually had physical changes in my outer ear, and it's weird. It's hard to explain, except that it feels like it's a totally different shape. And so I Googled that plus tinnitus plus lumbar puncture, a couple of those random things that I knew I was having. And luckily, it just happened to come up for a spinal fluid leak program at the university hospitals in Cleveland near where I live. So that was fortunate. And so I just, I kind of bombarded that department and said, I'll just take the first appointment with whichever person on the team, and got in with an ENT first. And then they got me to a neurologist. And, so that she kind of explained a little bit more to me about there's the cranial leaks, and then there's spinal leaks. So there's two separate things there, and then they have to evaluate for both. And then she told me that there's some that don't show up on imaging. So you could have a leak and they don't know it. You could have some other issues, and I didn't really understand the intricacy then, but really essentially what she was telling me is that you can have high spinal fluid pressure and low spinal fluid pressure going on at the same time. And I didn't really get that until probably like August of last year, where it kind of all clicked for me with what they were saying. But yeah, it's like, so that's kind of how I got to, this is where I'm going to have my starting point and what I think I have going on. And from there, it's been kind of just treating symptoms that I've gotten as I've been bedbound more and more, because throughout this process, I started out with about 4 to 6 hours where I could be upright without the excruciating head pain. And it got down to probably about 1.5 to 2 hours. And then at some point it was where it was like a half an hour, and there's just been different points. And sometimes there's days still where as soon as I get up, it's just, no, it's not going to be 4-hour day. And bending down, twisting, lifting any sort of weight at all of that, anything that creates some sort of pressure, like if you just imagine like lifting that the pain that you get when you cough, that pressure that you get when you sneeze or cough in your head, really essentially you're supposed to avoid that. And it's not something that's like feasible with life, because unless you could just lay flat and not lift anything and never bend, that's hard to do. So depending on what you do that day, you might get a few hours, you might not. But through all of it, it's been just, okay, this is happening, so let's treat this, and then I'll get a handle on that thing, and then the next thing comes up, so it's just been kind of like chasing my tail this whole time. And as I get one thing resolved, another thing is happening. And so probably about September, October of last year, I'm like, all right, now that I kind of have a picture of this, and I'll back up in a second, but once I kind of got a picture, I was like, I need to rethink the whole strategy. But so in that year that expanded between there, it's like I got diagnosed with POTS, or dysautonomia. They're considering it POTS because of the tachycardia that I get whenever I'm on that tilt table test, where they lay you flat and then they put you upright and you have to stay like forced upright. That was probably the most agonizing test I've had. You wouldn't think just staying upright on a table would be so hard, but it was crazy. So that diagnosis, and then there's just that cranial nerve compression component of all of this. Because if you think about your brain and the spinal fluid holding it up, like when you're lacking spinal fluid, or if it's fluctuating, that means your brain's going to be pushed down more, and that means all of those nerves right there are compressed, and then you get all kinds of funky symptoms. So there's a lot of neuropathy type symptoms, like numbness, tingling, just random pain. Like some days I'll just feel like my ankles were beaten with bats when I wake up, just those kind of things where each day the pain's variable. Yeah. So that's been the hardest thing, is just I feel like it's been a chasing my tail and trying to figure out what's wrong with me, and at the same time I'm just getting worse, and I'm like, it was so overwhelming. And then through all of this, it's like you are essentially looking for a neurosurgeon to confirm a diagnosis, because the neurologist is like, this is my theory too, but we need a surgeon because they're the ones who are going to have to figure out if there's a way to fix it, right? Like they're the ones who kind of sign off on that kind of thing. And
Wow.
I've seen 9 so far in 2 years, and that includes waiting like 8 months to go to a specialty spinal leak center at Duke University even. And there's just so few doctors that are trained on it, and it's so rare that there's very few places that you can go that they really understand how to do the diagnostic testing and read the imaging. It ends up kind of being a neuroradiology driven field more than neurosurgery, as far as finding things, because they have to have the evidence before the neurosurgeon
Right.
really can see what they're working with. And so, yeah, so it's like, it's been a lot of testing, and I never thought that it would be so devastating to hear your tests are normal so often too, and that's been another experience this whole journey. Is it's just there's the invisible piece of it where, I, I I don't look sick, and it's confusing, I think, even for my brain, but let alone other people's brains,
But
to
you're like, I
comprehend
am.
when you don't look ill. It's hard. Yeah, and then going to doctors and having them tell you that they don't find anything on the testing and don't find anything on the labs, that just starts to also make you feel like it's in your head, and then you start to question yourself. And so a bigger part of this journey, I think, more than the physical pain, has been dealing with the mental health aspect of all of this too, and that's a really important piece of it that I really didn't understand until I was living it, just living with something that is complex and invisible and rare, and that has no answers, and just over and over and over, and hearing no. I had got to the point where I wasn't sleeping. I still don't sleep well. I sleep about 2 to 3 hours a night, but the anxiety and the depression are just so like amped up, because it's like dealing with a grief, and it's, that
Totally.
ebbs and flows like it would if it was like you lost someone, and you do kind of, you do lose
Exactly.
someone,
And
you
then you're
lose who you were
bedbound.
before.
So then you
So
like
it
lose
really
so
is
much of your time
processing.
too, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, and then you have so much time to think about it too, because you're stuck in bed. And it's like the rumination part of it was hard, and that took a while. At one point, I think I had 3 therapists
Yeah.
and 2 psych. I was like, it takes a village because there's so much going on, and it's like, wow, just learning how to process the grief. And then kicker of all of this is the medication that they typically use to treat like high pressure, and this is kind of what we were leaning towards when this all started, are former psych meds or antidepressant or anti-seizure meds. So then they don't want you to take
Right.
certain depression certain types of meds with that. So it's already messing with all of the chemicals in your brain, and there's probably already a natural chemical imbalance going on with the compression of the adrenal glands and the hypothalamus and all of that part of the brain. So there's like a physical and mental aspect that's causing anxiety, and then you add on the vagus nerve piece of it, so you get the stress and the gut, the
Yeah.
health, and the GI upset, and also more anxiety. So it was like for a while there, I would wake up and with panic attacks, and it's like that. It was like waking up that someone was attacking you. That's what it felt like. Like I was like, and I would wake up like that, and I honestly think that part of that is more of a vagus nerve thing than any of it, because I'm like, it would just be so random and so sudden. But then, if you look at holistic health things, it kind of puts it together in a different way. So it's interesting because the body's funky and the nervous system is really funky. So it's like almost like dealing with a different illness every week. Like it varies so much. And so this week I'm smiling and happy, but it's like last week I might have been crying.
And you're allowed to have different days and different weeks from each other. Some weeks can be really good and some weeks can be really bad. And even one day can be really good and one day be really bad. And like you being open to, like I see on social media, like you're open with a lot of your followers as well. And like I love that like authenticity and like honest conversation that like you're opening for these people to be like, it is okay to like not feel okay and to highlight that maybe today is a day where you can't get out of bed or you only got out of bed for 1 hour, and that could just make the next person feel like validated in their story that I didn't leave bed either today, and I don't have to like beat myself up all day about it.
And I think and that's really been the silver lining of all of this is the community that the social media aspect has provided, and it's kind of just helps you when you're having those low days to know that there's other people out there, that you're not alone, that there's other people dealing with it. Because when it's something rare and you have your family support but they're not experiencing it, they don't understand what it feels like. And then like we were talking to the invisible aspect of it, you just start to feel like, is it in your head? So then when I discovered like the Facebook support groups, and I would see some of the comments about the symptoms, and I'm like, they have the same thing as me, and I'm like not glad that they have the same thing, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that it's not just me, and it's not, so it is something, it isn't just in my head, because someone else has it too. And that really made a big difference for me once I got there, because the first year, I don't think I really didn't get on social media too much because I was just so overwhelmed. And I still can't see well. That's another piece of this. So I had to stop working. I tried to work for about a month after this happened, and it just worked. Like I said, I kind of did product development. So I looked at a lot of code and stuff and worked on computers, and it was just not going to happen with whatever's going on with my eyes now since this occurred. But anyway, so that first year, it's like I just laid in bed, ruminated. When I could, tried to look things up, but it would just get so overwhelming that it would just be hard. And I honestly can't account for most of the time except for just worrying. And then once I started to feel a little bit more less afraid, I guess, of what might be out there, I guess. I don't even know if that's the right word, but just maybe not as easily influenced. I don't know. Let me see. If you, I guess I was afraid that if I went on the support groups before I had a strong understanding of what was going on with me, that it might like bias me into
Totally.
thinking
I
I
feel
have
that
something
way
else,
too.
if that makes sense. Like I was afraid I might get on the wrong path. Okay. Yeah, I don't know how to word it, but it's like I was worried about that piece of it, but I'm glad once I did get on there, and especially because I started on Instagram, which is a little bit smaller and less overwhelming than Facebook. It was easier to start with the actual community and see other people's experiences in pictures and in video, more than all of the words and the worry that you see in a lot of the support group pieces of it, And so that's where I kind of found my new kind of drive of what's going on, what am I going to do here, right? Because like I not working, I've spent 2 years, it's really hard because obviously I have to deal with like insurance stuff and long-term disability and social security and all of that, and that's a battle on its own. So that also made me more hesitant about sharing my story, because it's like, is that going to interfere with this? And then you always have that hanging over your head. So it's another anxiety and stress that you have anyway. But then I'm like, I'm sick. I I don't think that there's a doctor that doubts that I'm sick. It's just that they haven't found it. And now that I understand that and I feel more confident in that, that it's not that they're saying there's nothing wrong with me. It's that they're saying they don't know what to do with it right now, you know? And so once I kind of got that piece of it, I was able to kind of reform a plan because like so I started looking at my own all of these symptoms holistically, like from a whole body perspective, you know, put them on a list, just wrote them all down and started thinking about it systemically. You know, I'm like, all right, I used to be a sciencey person and I've always been very good with medicine and following trends, but I also was really big into holistic health before. And so I'm like, you know, maybe I need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what to do because right now I'm just chasing symptoms. It's 2 years in now. Like I kept thinking it was going to happen in a year, you know, it would take 6 months to find the answer and then I would be on the path to recovery. And then it's a year in and then you think, okay. And now it's like, all right, now I'm 2 years in and I'm still not on the path to recovery. I still don't really have answers. So what can I do? Because I can't live like that. I can't live in that state for the rest of my life. You know, I can't just live in a state of what if and worrying and everyone else having control over everything, you know, and that's something that I think a lot of people with chronic illness with my community, I feel like that's the biggest thing I hear is that you just feel like there's so little you have control over when you're ill because you have someone else that you have to worry about paying the bills. You have to worry about them controlling your money and deciding if you're sick enough to get your own money, you know, like with the disability kind of thing. I'm like, things like that are just shocking to me. And I didn't, you know, I knew it was tough, but I didn't know it would be that tough. And so, but I hear that a lot from people that they just feel like there's so little control that they have. And so I'm like, how can I help and what can I do to help us feel like we have some answers
Yeah, and like make
and
more of
have
a
some
path.
control, you know? Because I'm like, so once I started putting it together, yeah. And it's like, so once I started putting it together, I'm like, okay, if I look at it systemically, I think there's some things that are wrong with my body and that would be limiting. But, you know, the other things I'm like, is it just stuff that I can find solutions for, right? Like, so I figured out that I have the hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos by putting all these symptoms together and looking backwards and saying, okay, I have X, Y, and Z. And then, you know, then of course I confirmed it with the neurologist and it made more sense after that. And we can kind of chase those paths. But even with those types of details from our healthcare perspective, all that is just like one more thing on your list of what you have, but it's still not an answer. But if from a holistic health perspective, I'm like, okay, but I think there are answers out there, and I think there's things that we've been using in the wellness and holistic health space for years that are really good for things like chronic pain and inflammation and autoimmune disorders and things like that. And then, you know, I'm like, if I put these Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic and all these different things that I've done over the years and learned about, I'm like, what can come out of this? And so I've kind of, you know, I've been working on that since about August of last year, and that's where I've really come into some cool, like, people coming along my path and brands that came along my path that I'm like, aha, and it clicked, you know. And so there's some things that I found that have helped me from a supplementation perspective, as far as a couple key things that I think look at from a cellular reset level instead of, you know, like trying to fix the leak. I'm like, let me go back 5 levels. So I have the leak because of the genetic disorder that causes me to have weak collagen. So if I have something that can make the collagen stronger,
Right.
is this going to help with this issue? You know, like kind of putting it together that way instead of from a symptom perspective, putting it together from like a system perspective. And, you know, I started doing the collaboration piece to be able to find tools, actually, not really looking for supplements or anything like that. I just thought there might be some cool pain relief tools out there and I could try them and say if they worked or not, you know? So I was looking at like red lights and the massage guns, the vagus nerve stimulators, those things, because, you know, there are a lot of those things are very expensive. And I'm like, maybe I can help people. And that was my original thought for my social media page. So I was doing a lot of collabs and I'm like, okay, I'm too sick to do this even from bed. Like it's a lot of work to do all of this. And I'm like, and I don't know if that's the most helpful. So I'm like, let me see if I can back this up and find some people that can actually help me figure out some of this stuff too, you know? So it's like not just the devices. So then while I'm working on those brand collabs, I would come across someone like, for instance, the biggest, I think, improvement that I've had has been from this, it's called the trifecta of health is what it is. And it's like, basically it's like 3 different supplements and it's all things that are mostly, you know, they're found in nature or it's a really pure form of CBD. And before I was using the medical cannabis version of this, which is like it's basically like a fully pressed oil from the plant. But you know, that was all the all the medicine and stuff that was just making me so foggy, right? And I'm like, I hate that. I don't like having brain fog. I already had bad brain fog. So I just happened to be talking about it with a brand collab for something totally different. And this guy's like, I actually make a version that is a CBD version. So there's not any THC in it. So you don't get the brain fog from it. You don't get the drowsiness and some of those other side effects that you get from the cannabis piece. So once I started looking into that more and just understood what it did from a cellular perspective, I'm like, whoa, okay, I think this is huge. So we talked about it more and we actually are kind of doing almost like a trial to see if we can figure out the right volume and dosage of the 3 supplements that are part of that to work to help treat like inflammation and chronic pain so that we can say, okay, this, we know this is working for this now, and now we have this as an option for treatments. I think that's been kind of the cool thing now is like finding brands that are willing to say, hey, let's try this because it hasn't been tried yet because nobody has a CSF leak. And, you know, there's like 300,000 people in the country that have it out of however million people. So it hasn't been tried.
Like companies and you're able to like extend yourself out and be like, hey, maybe this could work and maybe that could work. Like, I love that you're trying to do that. And then when you do find something, it's nice that you're able to share that, you know, with your listeners as well and be like, oh, this one really worked.
Share it. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And I think, and the cooler thing is, I think like it, it's awesome because it's not things that are going to make you worse. Like you don't have to worry because it's food. Most of it, you know, it's like, so I don't worry about it like I would with all, like when I go to the neurologist and they're like, try this. It's a new medication that is going to probably make something else worse. And that scares me now because, you know, I at first I didn't look things, you know, I just took their word for it because I'm like, there's
found, you're able to research and be like, okay, this is what's in it, this is what the ingredients are.
Yeah.
You're able to like be more understanding of what you're putting in your body because
Right.
everything is connected. And like you said, then you just start to upset, you know, your skin and your GI tract and all of the other things that go hand in
Yeah.
hand.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Isn't that, and it's like, once that kind of came together, it's like a aha moment though, you know, and it's like, wow, okay, so that's kind of where my page came from and what I'm trying to do now. It's like, how can I find ways to help this whole big community that's out here suffering because it's horrible. And I would never want anyone to have to go through this a day longer than they need to. So if there's anything out there, I'm definitely willing to be the guinea pig, you know, and I'm like, I'm willing to beg for brands to try things and do that effort because, you know, I have the time while I'm waiting for an answer or for a fix. So it's like, so it's been really cool, you know, and I think,
here. So you had
yeah.
you got the lumbar puncture because they were trying to investigate. Through investigating, you got the CSF leak.
Yes.
The CSF leak has caused a numerous amount of horrible symptoms
Right.
from what we have gathered so far. And then along with this, that's when you're
Yes.
also getting other diagnoses
Yeah.
like your EDS, and you're finding POTS, and you're like, okay, things are starting to make more sense because I'm realizing it was a lot more than just this. And now you're also dealing with the side effects of your CSF leak on top of all the
Yeah.
other things that they found that were underlying. So to just bring it back to the CSF leak first, so what have the doctors kind of said, not holistically, I guess,
Yeah.
that they are wanting your path to be?
Yeah, so that is a great question. We're still, we're still investigating, and the thing is that, luckily in a way, luckily since it is a small world of doctors, it is like kind of a big group that all know what each other's strengths are, right? And what they're good at treating. There's 3 or 4 different CSF leak centers that are kind of recognized for being the leaders, and so there's Duke, there's Stanford, Cedars-Sinai, and then University of Colorado, and Mayo. So I guess that's like 5. But so then it was kind of, we're looking. So me and my neurologist are making a plan of, all right, so what is the next doctor? Which one do we think? Based on, they have like monthly meetings where they talk about complex cases and, abstractly, right? Not to get tips, I don't think, but abstracts where they kind of discuss these harder cases and what the options might be. So right now we are looking at sending the imaging to Stanford and Cedars-Sinai are the 2 there, but it's, it's another, it's a long wait again, like they all have fairly decent wait lists.
And this is again just in hopes of.
But it's
like
at least in
hopes
process.
of them finding something further, right?
Yeah, and it's so it's like, right, exactly. So like if there really truly is a place where there is a leak that was caused by the lumbar puncture or by whatever shifted whenever they were doing the lumbar puncture, these are the guys that apparently should be the best at reading the imaging to see that if it's there. So that's the best hopes of finding the imaging. There's a doctor. I was fortunate enough last year to go to the first Canadian spinal fluid, it was called a intracranial hypotension, so low pressure conference for their charity, and I went to that one only because of where I live. It's only like 4 or 5 hours to Toronto, so it's actually the closest big city. So I was just thinking logically, this might be my biggest opportunity to go to a conference because I can lay in a back seat for 4 hours. I didn't know about flying yet. I hadn't done that, and I was too afraid to try it at that point still. But yeah, so I was fortunate to go to that and get some other names, so since that was the Canadian system, it was also doctors that are outside of the US healthcare system. So some other approaches that maybe we aren't doing yet, some European approaches that we know that they're light years ahead on some of the research and things for rarer issues. But there's a doctor in Switzerland who had published a paper about people specifically who were getting spinal fluid leaks or these type of symptoms after lumbar puncture. So they're considered post-dural puncture headache patients. And so the paper that he wrote is essentially like he did like an exploratory surgery on the region, and there's just like this teeny tiny microscopic hole in the dura that they found. And even on that patient that they did the study, even after that, she still wasn't well after they found that leak. There was still what they call bleb on the MRI, so she ended up still needing 2 surgeries. So, these are only 1 or 2 case scenarios that a lot of these guys have seen. When it's a bigger issue, like an obvious leak, like let's say that there's a fistula or a big tear, something like that, it's easier to see on these scans. But a lot of these are just, doctors that have had 1 or 2 cases where they've seen something similar. But that doctor, I was really excited because I set up a consult with him, but then, as being disabled someone in America has to be. You have to tell your insurance people everything, and you tell the long-term disability your upcoming appointments, what your plan is, etc. And when I told them that I had found this doctor, they told me that if I got care from him, though, that I will lose my benefit. So, that makes it even more frustrating because I'm like, I think there's some doctors out there, but if you see doctors outside of the country, then so that limits you, right? So now I'm limited to these doctors
Um,
at these centers. So I'm waiting about two right now. And after that, I honestly don't know what the option is if
And I
those
feel like
two
most
don't find a
doctors are
leak.
aware
So,
of the risk, right? Like
what
they're
I
aware of the
find from my,
CSF leak risk because as a PI patient, when I went into the hospital and, there was the concern of
yeah,
aseptic meningitis and
uh-huh,
we were talking about a lumbar puncture, like all of those risks were talked about and patients
yeah,
just like you and the headaches and all of it, they outlined this is the
right.
risk and ultimately I didn't want to take the risk, but maybe
Oh,
it's not
that's
like
great.
I am from
Yeah.
Canada. Maybe it's not like that everywhere where they are aligning these risks enough because I feel like you
Okay.
even now post
Yeah.
receiving the CSF leak diagnosis, like were you told
Yeah.
before enough of all of these risks?
Right. No. Yeah, definitely not. That's actually something that I believe one of that I've seen a petition that there's like some legislation they're trying to get for that to be required, even for like, I guess they're not epidurals, but spinals for birth.
Okay, I'm sorry. I guess we are going to continue like this because my computer is deciding to not be having it. So, sorry.
Yeah, no
Okay,
problem.
so yeah, we were just kind of on the CSF leak note and then post CSF leak. So if you want to just pick up where we left off.
Yeah, yes. Okay. After the plan right now is to see those two doctors, and after that I'm not sure what the plan would be, like if they don't find anything. The good news is that there seem to be a lot more papers being published even from last year to this year, or sorry, from like 23 to 24, I should say, not this year yet, but actually even from 24 to first quarter 25, number of papers and the research that's being done on the leaks, on the spinal fluid pressure, on some of these other things that they think could be attached to autoimmune that cause the same type of symptoms with the dysautonomia. The good news is there's research being done. It's not it's scary to think that there's, if after these two doctors, if they don't find anything, that there might not be anyone else that can help me right now. That's very scary, and I
Right.
think that's been the biggest thing to grasp. So that's another reason why I'm really trying to kind of take this into my own hands and see what I can do to be as well as I can. And
Yeah, so
what,
that being said, what are
yeah.
you doing holistically for yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's been a work in progress and kind of and it's not always forward progress for sure, but I think I've kind of figured out, like, I think there's a, people use the word bioavailable a lot now. The essentially what that means is there's like things that we all need that will work for, let's say, 75% of people. So I'm like, okay, I know I need to make sure I have that stuff. And then I know for me, there's also the other 25% that might be like the collagen and things that are related to my body's lacking issues that, that need
Right.
extra support, right? So I think I figured out a way to get that 25% kind of dialed in more now for different issues and different groupings. So I think that piece of it is very specific, and it's things like peptide therapies, and even lower levels than that, there's like these regulators that are smaller than peptides and amino acids that you can take, and that's something that people have been using in the wellness space for like longevity for a long time, but I don't know that it's been used for disease management much. So that's something I'm trying to learn a lot more about there, and that's one piece of the puzzle that I found, that taking those supplements has helped with my brain fog, and it's starting to help with a few of the types of pain symptoms that I have. And then the other piece of it that I think is the like what would help 75% of the people is the trifecta of health piece of it, which is getting these minerals and these elements that we used to get and used to be in our food, and or that we need and could use more of because it's just not in our American diet, and get those into our system and see how our body is after we do that. And then the other piece of it's way more scientific. And the great news is the company that I've worked with to find this, the guy that does all of this, he's super crunchy, so he's been in the wellness space for a long time, but he is like he's very good at figuring that out, so working with him, it's been really great to find these things. And that works with the endocannabinoid system, which is essentially where all of our cells start. So that's working. It's located like in the thyroid, in the pituitary, all of that stuff. So where our cells begin. So I think of it this is a very basic non-scientific way of thinking about it, but it's that we have angry cells, and if we give them these things that our cannabinoids need to just feel better, our nerves and our cells get less angry and they make happier cells that then also stop releasing so much inflammation into your body. So it's like by doing all of that, those things, you get like a lot of relief. But then, obviously those supplement pieces only work, number one, if you use them consistently, right? Like you have to be consistent. You can't
Right.
expect overnight changes. It's not a pain pill, right? It's not going to just make everything go away. But the other
Yeah,
thing of it, the other piece of it is just really looking at nutrition, diet, and how I can move my body. And honestly, that piece of it
definitely.
has been just in the last month or so, because a little over a month ago, actually about 5 weeks, it was the end of February, I had to do a functional capacity exam. And what that is it's like a PT or an OT that does it, and they're basically looking to see what you're able to do from a work perspective. So they kind of take you through things that you would do if you were working in an office. Like if can you sit for this long, can you lift this much weight, can you do this, go up and down. And I was able to do so little, Mykayla. It was like scary and eye-opening. Like I knew I wasn't in great
Mhm.
shape anymore and I wasn't able to do a lot, but
But that
I
like
I
laid
had
it out for you.
yeah, yeah, and it was like, okay, that was very scary, and it's like I live with my parents, right? And they're older. I moved back here to help them, and now they're taking care of me, and that scares me, so I'm like,
Aw.
there has to be ways that I can be better and feel better, and I think that I've kind of figured out some of those pieces that are needed to do that, but it's a combination. And I think as chronically ill people, we have less options with our diet a lot of times.
I think that like your nutrition and like
Mhm.
eating fiber and eating your protein and drinking your water and all those things are
Yeah.
so important, but especially in the chronic illness community, people
Hmm.
tend to like steer away from those things because you're not feeling good or because you
Yeah.
can't get out of bed, that maybe you aren't as eating as good or you're not drinking enough water. But when you really go back to like those basics and those roots and those
Yeah.
vitamins and the minerals, and then like you said, adding in that extra 25% of what your body is missing, like the
Yep.
collagen. I think that's also really important. And just overall, the advocacy of all of this,
Mhm.
we both know is so important, but just being able
Right.
to like share stories and hope that, this helps
Yep.
the next person.
Yeah. Yeah,
Is
exactly.
there anything else that you want to share today, Carissa?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really it. Is I just I really hope that if I can save someone a year, save them a year because I spent a year documenting this journey, then I'm glad to have done it. And I think this community has, like I said, been the silver lining of all of this. Is it's been a world of strangers, but I feel closer to them than I do my family most of the time now, and that's been
Yeah.
amazing. And so I'm glad to, be able to share with your followers too, and just get so if there's anyone else that's dealing with this out there and wants to follow along, we'll put everything in there. But I love to try to help people. And the other piece that I'm doing to fit with all of this is just working on grounding and trying to have a routine and just be more intentional and all of that stuff. So
Back to the
it
basics. Yeah.
yeah, Exactly. It's hard to do, and I think the other thing I just wanted to say is for anyone out there that's listening is just number one, you're not alone, and your pain's real, your pain's valid, and there's help out there, and there's solutions. There's something that can make you feel a little better, and that's all I'm
Yeah.
aiming to do is try to feel a little better because it goes a long way, when you're sick.
It
So
goes a very long way.
yeah,
Just like an extra hour, right? Like, if you have
yeah,
a day where you only have like 2 hours of your day, but then the next day you have three, like even that
right,
small little bit, that extra hour, use that hour intentionally. Like, I really
yeah.
love the word intentional. Like, when you're eating, sit down and eat intentionally. Like, don't be
Mhm.
rushing through your meals. You're not digesting properly. Do a lot of the things that you do during your day
Yeah.
with good intention.
Yeah, exactly. And just try to focus on that, and what? By focusing on that and focusing on a routine, it does help sometimes with the pain too, right? Like it gives you something else to concentrate on, and sometimes you can
Totally.
feel a little less in pain when you're moving around and distracted. So it all ends up helping as long as you don't overdo
And
it
can you
too
share
much
with
too
the
fast.
listeners? Yeah, totally, right? If you overdo it too much too fast, you just straight burnout.
Yeah, exactly.
And can you share with our listeners just where to find you, Carissa, and how they can connect
Yeah.
with you?
Yes, on Instagram, it's chronically_Karissa with a K, and on TikTok, the same, but instead of the underscore, a dot.
Yeah, totally. I will definitely I'll have all of Carissa's links and everything in there so that you can find her as well. But thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it, and you sharing some of your tips and your tricks, holistically and all. And I hope that people can then be diverted over to your page and just learn a little bit more.
And thank you so much for having me and let me share my story.
Thank you so much.